This is Creepy and Geeky, a part of the Morbidly Beautiful Podcast Network. Welcome to Creepy and Geeky. I'm your host, Robert, and today's episode is the start of something old and something new. Longtime listeners will remember that in the beginning, I did episodes that were more focused on one-off double features, and then I started doing more deep dives on franchises. While the franchises were a lot of fun, and I'll likely be diving into some more in the future, I wanted to get back to the original essence of the show, and that's on doing fun double features. So I'm asking my guests now, what's your favorite double feature? On today's episode, Angel Krause returns to the show, and she's brought me the movies Z and Come Play. Angel is the co-host of the Voices from the Mausoleum YouTube channel, where she talks about all kinds of horror stuff. Welcome back to the show, Angel.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Robert. I'm excited. Every time I see people posting double features, I'm like, I never really think about that. So then when you asked me, I was like, I know I'm terrible at this, but I think I can come up with some. I'm like, let me just think about themes and things, and
Yeah.
shockingly, I was able to get some suggestions out to you.
No, definitely. Yeah, no, you had some good suggestions. I've been asking guests for 3 to 5 different choices. That
Right.
way, I kind of have a little bit of play in there. If it's like one, if it's something that I'm really not kind of in the mood for, I have a couple of different other choices to kind of, play
Yeah.
around with. So that way I'm not completely, locked into doing something I really don't want to do. And
No,
so
that's super smart. Totally get it.
yeah. And so this way,
Yeah.
and then plus there's maybe if there's something in one but not in another, then maybe I can make suggestions like, say I didn't I wasn't feeling one of these two movies today. I could have suggested
Yeah.
something that was similar themed. And that's what I've done in the past is like if it doesn't quite match up, then we can kind of hash it out and see how it works out and stuff.
Yeah.
Um but I love that. I love being able to come up with a cool double feature theme. And it's fun too when the guests bring it to me because that's kind of where I'm at with it is I want you guys to like tell me what you guys are interested in. Like what is like something that you guys because I want you to be passionate about it. Even if I'm not going to be passionate about it, it's still going to make a good conversation. Um
Yeah. Yeah.
and and that's what's fun about it, and so there's going to definitely be some fun episodes coming up, especially including this one, which these movies were interesting. Z and Come Play, they are both movies surrounding kids that are menaced by not really imaginary friends, but like
Hmm.
otherworldly entities. Um,
Hmm.
and both of them are it was weird. They like
Are you at a loss of words? It's
I'm not
that
at a
makes me
loss of
nervous.
words. No, I'm not at a loss of words. They were interesting. They they each both had their um both positives and negatives. And so I found both of them um at least enjoyable. Um let's see. Come Play was a little bit slow for me at times. And
Yeah.
we can get into that here in a little bit, but I really like the ending. And then
Yeah.
Z was I think I think was a little bit lesser. So I think Come Play was I enjoyed more, even though it was a bit slower.
Hmm.
Um, but I did like the revelations in Z as well. So
Yeah.
yeah, they're both very interesting. So
Yeah.
but yeah, tell me why you brought these to me today.
Um, so I saw I think I watched it maybe not quite 2 years ago as like a first watch. I'd never even heard of it. And somebody had recommended it and I watched it and I really liked it a lot. But
Which one was this
anytime
one?
for Z,
Z. Okay.
yeah. And so like but then when I would ask other people about it, they were like, "Oh, I didn't really like that. I didn't think it was that good." And I was just kind of like sitting in the dark on it because like no one wanted to talk about it because nobody liked it. Which is fine. But then I had seen a trailer for Come Play, and I was just like, it's just one of those things, and I'm sure this has happened to you. Where like, I'm gonna watch that, I'm gonna watch that, I'm gonna watch that, and then it takes forever to get to it. And I finally
Yeah.
watched it. Like, oh my god, this is so similar tonally, and so many like there's a lot of similarities between this and that movie Z, and I really liked that, and I
Yeah.
ended up really liking Come Play as well. But yeah, I don't think about movies comparing in the form of like double features. I don't think about it very often. And this one was the first one that I think, was at the top of the list because it was one of the first times in my life I'd watched a movie and been like, this would make a really good double feature because I just never think about that. Until people say it, they say things, and then I'm like, oh yeah, I agree. But I never think of it on my own. And so when you ask, I also thought was thinking too, this I don't feel like these two are going to come up very often in conversation because people have either not seen them or never heard of them or they just didn't like them and don't want to talk about them. So and I really did. So, here we are.
Yeah. No, I'd never heard of either one of these before. So yeah, it was
Yeah.
definitely when you because you definitely brought me some stuff that was more um like two of the things you brought me, this one and another one, were things I hadn't really heard of. I'd heard of one of the movies in the third one that
Hmm.
you had told me about, but
Yeah.
it had been so long since I'd seen the trailer for it that I'd forgotten about it.
Yeah.
And then um and then the second one you brought me was really good, and I was like, I kind of wanted to do that one more just because I was familiar with both movies. I'd covered one of them before.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I was just like, let me step out of my comfort zone and let me try to do something that I'm not that familiar with. So that way
Yeah.
be maybe it'll be something good.
Yeah.
And maybe it'll be something that will spark a really good conversation. And I because I figure either way it'll be a good conversation.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it was just yeah, I thought both of these movies were good. I don't dislike either one of them. I think
Yeah.
both of them kind of dragged in parts,
Hmm.
even for being movies that aren't very long. I think they're both about an hour and a half as it
Yeah.
is.
They're definitely on the
Um,
shorter side. Hmm.
yeah. So they're not terribly long or anything, and they're not boring. I did watch them back to back.
I did
Um,
too. Yeah.
and so tonally, like you said, tonally they're very similar.
Yeah.
They go about it slightly differently.
Yep.
One is more of an imaginary friend. That's what Z is about, is that this kid is having an imaginary friend,
Hmm.
and the kid starts either the kid's doing stuff, he's being convinced by the imaginary friend to do something,
Hmm.
or the imaginary friend is doing it.
Yeah.
You're not quite sure, in the beginning what's what. You
Hmm.
don't know if the kid's just insane, or
Right.
if it's the creature. Because you don't really see the creature for a while. You just see, like,
Right. It
the
takes a
kid ends
while.
up yeah, the kid ends up drawing a huge fucking thing up on the wall of it, and
Oh my
creepy ass.
God.
I'm like,
Yeah.
that was just creepy.
Yeah.
Um, but but
Mm.
it's but it was I think because it took a little while because they were trying to leave it ambiguous, but it's like also at the same time, if you watch the trailers, it's not ambiguous. So it's like they kind of spoil it if you watch the trailer beforehand. Um,
Yeah.
and which is fine. I have no problem with that. I'm not one of those people who goes like who stays away from trailers. I know there's a lot of people who just like, oh, I don't want any aspect of the movie spoiled for me. I'm like, I can't
Yeah.
be like that. I have to know what the movie's about going into it.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
have to know, even if it shows me too much, I'm gonna forget by the time I go see the movie anyway.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah. Yeah.
but yeah, it's a, but it was interesting. I liked, um, that there was the mother in this was an actress. who'd been in a couple of horror things before, most
Yep.
notably for me, Final Destination 2.
Hmm.
Um, and so she's Keegan Connor Tracy, I think is her name. Um, so she was interesting in this. It's an interesting movie, and an interesting concept. I like how they did it with the imaginary friend, and that they're doing all this. Like I said, that whether or not the kid is the one doing it, or if it's um
Right.
or if there's something malevolent around them. But it's and I like I said before, I like how the ending is, because you find out, and spoiler alert for everybody, that you find out at the end of it that the mother
Hmm.
has that she hurt when she was little, she had an imaginary friend named Z. It's the same imaginary friend, and she'd just forgotten about it. Um and then she does what she can to protect her kid.
Yeah.
Um and I like that. And this is where it kind of parallels with the other movie as well. Um that there's this, the mother um protects her child and pays the price for it.
Yeah.
Um and so I thought that was interesting. I thought it was cool, this like child in peril aspect, the moms doing what they have to do. Um the relationships between the parents are different in each one of these. In this one, the parents actually have a good a fairly good relationship. They're not really like in a bad relationship or anything.
Right.
But the dad gets killed by the creature and everything. And so it's if you're into this kind of thing, I would say definitely seek it out. It's definitely interesting because, like, if you're into this thing, I could, yeah, you could compare it to Boogeyman. I could see you making that comparison, like putting this into
Yeah.
another double feature with that,
Yeah. I
because of that
agree.
aspect. This malevolent creature that's kind of just that only the little child is seeing. Um, so that aspect is interesting. And the kind of curse it puts on the whole family. Um, so yeah, so that definitely. I didn't even think about Boogeyman until you had said that it's similar to that. I like Boogeyman, but I also gave it the same rating that I gave these. I gave these a solid 3 on Letterbox, both of them, which is good. It's a good movie. Um,
Yeah. I think it's for me like one of the things that I like about both of them is like if you're somebody who also just really likes like statement horror where the horror is not, left on the back burner. I think these fit that because, in Z, it's very much a story. So the events that happen between her and her son and Z coming into the picture it does like he had never had an imaginary friend before. It didn't happen until she went back to go start to clean out her childhood home after her mother passed away. And
right,
so she has to like go through all this stuff at her house and she's like reliving moments from her childhood. You get the impression, although they don't really dwell on it a lot, but just from like some of the stuff her sister says, like you get the impression that like they didn't really have the best upbringing. She was in and out of therapy, then things with the imaginary friend got worse and so it's like all these things. And so once she is like reopening those childhood trauma wounds, that's when Z's like just shows up and starts making a mess of everything. And I
right,
just kind of liked this tie in of like when you become a parent, you take all of the things that you dealt with your parents, whether it's good or bad, and that becomes a part of your life as a parent in a different way. And so,
yeah,
like, my childhood before my dad got custody of me was not a super great one. And I remember being scared going into motherhood of like, I don't feel like I'm capable of doing these things, but here's all the things that I'm scared of, and I never want to be this, and I never want to do that, and I never want to, all these things.
right,
And so, because you want to be better for your babies, like you want to
right,
be better for them. And so, and this mom did everything she could to be better. and it caught up to
Yeah.
her because she never dealt with it. And then
Yeah.
it did nothing but make her less than what she wanted to be as a mother. And it put her in these, obviously, these weird situations. I think Z to me would have been, and I think filmmakers struggle with making shorter films because they feel like if it doesn't meet like a certain time, then it can't be like a feature length film. But I think Z would have been better if they had cut out a lot of the scenes where she's like in the house by herself. Like,
Yeah.
I think we got the message, right? Like, we got the point. We get like what's going on. There were some things that happened there that I think could have been left out. It would have made for a shorter film. It would have felt like a tighter, overall arc, and we wouldn't have
Right.
felt, I think, some of that like what you were talking about, where it feels like it's definitely like slower in certain things. I think that was one of them for me. But I love her. The first thing I think I ever saw her in is she's the seer or whatever you call it, the medium or whatever in White Noise, which is one of my favorite PG-13
Mm.
movies. And she was so convincing and great in that. And every time I saw her after that, I was like, oh, that's the lady from White Noise. Like, so I always think of her. And then she was also in Once Upon a Time. She played one of the fairies. I
Right.
loved her in that.
Yeah.
She was very cute. She was also in one of my shows that got canceled on Netflix called The Magicians. Like, she's got ties and like all kinds of stuff like this. And it
Yeah.
just seems to really be, I think, where she excels because she's just really great in these
Yeah.
environments. And
No,
I thought
I
the
really
kid
like
actor was great.
yeah. No, I really like when actors like embrace the
Mm-hmm.
horror side
Yeah.
of things. Like they just keep going back to it because it's like their home, and they just
Yeah.
as much as they go off and they'll do occasionally, the more straight, stuff and everything like that, that they still come back to horror because that's really what they enjoy.
Yeah.
And you can tell that sometimes with some of these actors and stuff that they really enjoy being in that genre.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I always point out Barbara Crampton, who is like such a
Mm-hmm.
huge advocate for horror, and she's done
Yeah.
soap operas. She's just as big of a soap opera actor as she
Yep.
is a horror actor,
Oh yeah.
and it's so funny that she crosses those lines that shouldn't really mix at all.
Right.
And I love that, and I love that when you get people who just so embrace it like that. It's just great. But yeah, the kid actor was good in this too. I
Mm-hmm.
agree, and I agree as a parent. And I didn't have thankfully I didn't have a very like abusive childhood.
Yeah.
Um, I wouldn't say it was always the greatest. And there's
Sure.
things that I definitely have made sure that I didn't pass on to my children, that was
Yeah.
passed on to me.
Yep.
And so, that's something that if you're a good parent, you make sure that you are constantly aware of that kind of
Yeah.
thing because you can slip into bad um uh aspects of
Yeah.
parenting because it's what you knew, it's what you
Yeah.
grew up
It's
with, and
it's
so it was a
really
bad
difficult
example.
sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so, your default is to like think like that because that's how you were treated and everything. And so you want to just make sure, okay, well, that's not how I'm going to be as a parent.
Mm-hmm.
I've got to do things differently,
Yeah.
and better. And, and I think that for the most part, I think that I've done pretty well at that. I still have a really good relationship with my own kids. Um,
I think
so
I also grew up when I was a little bit older. I grew up in a house full of yellers. And so like I always told myself, I was like, I'm not
mm,
gonna be a yeller. Like, but it's instinctual because it's like exactly like you said, like it's all you know. And I
yeah,
think like, this these moments of like, because you can tell in, especially in Z, because the dynamic, the mom and child dynamic in Come Play is very different, for a few different reasons. But with this mom in particular in Z, you can tell that she is aware of the fact that like she doesn't know what she's doing. Like, she has these moments where she's like so sure she's doing the right thing, and then she's like, oh, am I? Like, there's a lot of, and I felt like that was such a realistic approach to like when things get really bizarre and you feel like you're out of, like, things are out of control and you don't know what to do to help anyone you love, but particularly your child. that felt like a more realistic like realization, because I'm going to tell you, like, her relationship with the dad, or her husband rather, they seemed fine, but like she clearly felt like she couldn't be honest with him because she
Yeah.
had their son put on medication without even consulting him, because once again we have this trope where the husband doesn't take it serious, and or the partner doesn't take it serious, and they're left dealing with it on their own. And I hate to say, like, as garbagey as it may sound, but like if I was put in that position where I had to make a decision on my own because I see an issue and the other person that's so scared doesn't, I'm gonna do what I need to do. I don't know if that necessarily means medication or not, but I totally was like with her on it. Like, I got it. I was like, let's do whatever we
Yeah.
can. Like, so
Yeah. No, of course. Yeah, I think sometimes, yeah, you know, that was a very realistic aspect of parenting, that,
yeah.
when you don't have that support, that
Uh-huh.
sometimes you just got to do what you got to do. And
Yep.
and that did make, I think both of these are fairly realistic in terms of how the parents were dealing with everything. Um and I appreciated that aspect, that it, for the most part, it didn't seem contrived or
No.
overly melodramatic. It
Yeah.
seemed fairly lived in and real. Both of these movies had parents who were dealing with their own stuff. In Z, the mom is dealing with her own mother dying,
Mm-hmm.
like on her deathbed, and then dying, and then having to deal with the sister who's a junkie, who, and so, like, there's all this other aspect going on,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's going on, that she has to, and then her child is having all these, you know emotional issues stemming from this imaginary friend, and he's like hurting people, and then in
Wild.
come
Yeah.
play, she's got, her and her husband are, the dad's moving out because they have a bad relationship or whatever, um because she doesn't feel like he's home enough to take care of the son, and when he is
Yep.
there, he's the fun parent,
He's
where
the
she's like
fun
the not
dad.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And as
Yep.
the fun dad, I understand the frustrations that the wife has,
Yeah.
because my wife has expressed them to me as well. And so,
Yeah.
it's something that as a father and a husband, you have to kind of reconcile and try to work on. um and so
Yeah.
it's interesting to see those dynamics play out, and
Yeah.
get that kind of more realistic. And that's what I love about horror too, is, people are so dismissive of horror and everything,
Yeah.
but I'm like, look, every other genre can fit in horror. You can do comedy,
Yes.
you can do drama, you can
Yep.
do musical, you can do
Oh my God.
everything that
Everything.
there is, that you can do in a regular. And this is why, generally speaking, I don't watch, like, I'll watch comedy and action movies, regular plain ones, not with horror.
Yeah.
But I don't go out of my way to watch dramas anymore, because I don't need to watch real life stuff. Like, it's boring to me to watch other people's miseries and, whatever else, they're, so I just watch fantasy stuff, basically. I
Yeah.
know that makes me weird, but it's all good.
No, I get it.
Like, I haven't watched Oppenheimer. I have no desire to see Oppenheimer, because I'm like,
I don't have any desire to see that either. I did see
yeah.
Barbie,
And
but I didn't care about it.
oh, I love Barbie. Barbie was
Barbie was so
freaking
good.
awesome.
Yeah.
Um, but Oppenheimer, nah, screw that. That was boring.
Yeah. No
And
thanks.
I'm sure it's a great movie. Don't get me wrong. I like Christopher Nolan. I think
Yeah.
he's a good director. I think he's made some great genre films, science fiction, action-y films and everything. But watching the more realistic drama stuff, I'm just like, nah, I don't I don't got time for that in my life. I'm turning 50 this year. Um,
I
I
get
ain't
it.
got that much time. Come on, people.
No, I get it. Yeah. I think it's that is I will say, I think for the most part, what I'm looking for when I watch horror movies, other than monster movies, you already know how I feel about those, but when I'm watching other horror movies, I am really looking for other like genres. Like, I'm looking for characters that I'm going to care about because they've got other stuff going on.
Yeah.
I get into horror ships where I'm like, oh, I hope these people end up together and they get it figured out or whatever, right? Or
Right.
I want the family to like come back together and heal after whatever they've been through. Like I I want those other things because I think if you can make me care about the characters, I'm in. Like if I
Yeah,
don't care about the characters, I'm not going to care about anything else that happens in the movie because what difference does it make to me if I'm not connected to anything? So
right.
I really like other like things mixed in, and I think horror is the only genre that you can do that with to this extent.
Yeah, I think so too. Because I mean, you know, it is, but horror's funny in that way that you can sometimes like you depending on the movie, you're either rooting for the characters to survive and all that, or you're rooting for them all to die. And it just, you know,
Sure.
mostly slashers where you're rooting for them all to die. Um
Right. Yes.
but yeah, and that's what's fun about the genre. Again, is just this that you can have so many variations in it and still enjoy them for all their, you know, variety. Um
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. Even when you're watching two movies that are very similar, like Z and Come Play, there's still
Yeah.
differences in both of these that make them interesting and not exactly, you know, the same movie. So while they have
Yeah.
similarities, they differ in quite. Like I said, you know, in Z, the couple, while they have their issues, they were still mostly a happy couple, and they were
Yeah.
still working through issues. You know,
Yeah.
they were still trying and working through it. Whereas the other one, we come into it at basically almost the end of their relationship.
Yeah.
So, and the dad's moving out and having to deal with that. So,
Yeah. And I think that, and then it's when it comes to like the themes, it's, Z is more of the past affecting the present. And then,
yeah,
in Come Play, it's more about like just living in the present. I mean, you've got a mom with a nonverbal child who is struggling because, her son won't make eye contact. He doesn't speak. She
yeah,
thinks it's her fault. And as parents, we carry guilt over some of the most ridiculous things sometimes. Like sometimes the things we carry guilt about are things that genuinely don't matter. And then there's times like that where you really just feel like if I had done something sooner, it would have been better for them. And then but by the time, obviously, that in this situation, he's going to the speech therapist, he does the phone stuff to text and to communicate. But, she carries a lot of guilt. And because, like you said, with his relationship with his dad being so fun and they enjoy each other's company. And like, meanwhile, he won't even make eye contact with her, which is actually a very common thing in children on the spectrum. Like that's really
oh
common.
yeah,
And it's so and it's so it was interesting. And so I have a sister who tried for a really 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 long time to get pregnant, and then she was finally able to. It took years, it took a lot of doctors, a lot of medication, a lot of stuff, and she was finally able to have a baby. And my nephew is now, my god, I think he's going to be 22. Oh my
oh
god, I think
wow,
he's going to be 22 next month or in February. And but he's autistic. Like he's
yeah,
pretty he has a part-time job that he works, but as far as like being able to live on his own and carry on, in the way that you would think a child at that age, your child at that age would be able to do, that's not really something that's going to happen for him. And so whenever I watched this the first time, it was such a different connection for me because it is very much a mom trying to figure out how to navigate these things with a nonverbal, child that is on the spectrum. Like she's trying to do the right things. She's scared she's already messed them up, but she does these like things where she creates isolation, and that makes things worse.
yeah,
And don't like, I mean, we try really hard as parents not to make things worse, but sometimes by trying to be protective in the wrong way, it leads to very unhealthy things, like the situation, because she lied about the situation with the little friend that he hit when they were younger. Like he didn't understand why they weren't friends anymore. And then he's like, well, I hit you. And he's like, I didn't care about that. Your mom said you don't want
yeah,
to be my friend anymore. And it reveals all of these things. It's like, so it takes this event of getting sought out by this creature through I'm sure there's like a whole tech, subplot to this film, but there's this creature that comes after the lonely and tries to
right,
convince them to go to this other world with him and be his friend. And they took that for her to kind of back up and realize these are some of the other things that you're not doing that might, or that could be hurting the situation.
Right. Yeah, I think there was kind of a I wondered if there was kind of a like a weird commentary about screen time
Yeah.
usage also, but I was like, I really hope that's not the case because they did make a point in the very beginning to mention that because he's autistic, he needs that device to
Hmm.
communicate.
Yeah.
And that and they
Yeah.
kept talking about it throughout the whole thing about him trying to learn but doing it at his own pace and
Yep.
everything. And so I don't think the screen time thing was really a commentary at, at,
Hmm.
at all, because it felt like they were not focusing on it, but there were a couple of instances where it was like, are they?
Hmm.
So and
Yeah.
it and
Yeah.
that was a little frustrating, like I said, because I've worked with autistic kids and special needs kids before, so I know
Mm.
all about the not looking, not making
Yeah.
eye contact,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and be nonverbal and everything. And you have to
Hmm.
find the different the different ways of communicating on both sides.
Yeah.
So it was an interesting movie, because of that, with my own experience with that, um to kind of see that and to see that,
Hmm.
yes, as a mom, she's going to be frustrated because she just wants to connect with her kid. um
Hmm.
and and a lot of her frustrations were because of the dad.
Hmm.
And like we said, him coming in to be the fun parent, when and her having to be more of the serious, disciplinarian or whatever.
Yeah.
And that sucks.
Yeah.
um but it's one of those situations where it's just kind of hard to balance it. But it made for an interesting movie because of that. um
Yeah.
it's
Um, the guy that plays the dad, I really like him. He's from
Yeah,
the Belko Experiment. He was in Hush. He was in Underwater. He's been in
he's
a
in
bunch of stuff.
I think he's in 10 Cloverfield Lane as
10
well.
Cloverfield Lane. I think it's like John Gallagher Jr. or something
John
like that.
Gallagher Jr., yeah.
But yeah, I think, with the tech thing, what my takeaway was, because I do feel like they kept bringing it up for a reason. For me, I think it was more about showing that it's a useful tool in moderation. I think we all need moderation. Like, my son has a tablet, he watches his tablet, he plays games. Like,
Yeah.
I think that there's, we also do other things. We do art projects together, we do cars together, we do other things. But if that's what he wants to do, and sometimes God knows I need him to do it, like, I need to
Yeah.
do something else. Can you just sit with this for, um,
Yeah.
and I think, because there's like that scene in Come Play where she throws all the technology out of the house, and Larry, which is the creature's name, still comes through anyway. And I think it's more of that, this whole, like, technology is not the problem. Like, I kind of
Yeah.
took it as more of like an underlying of like, hey, like, it's fine. Like,
The technology was the doorway, but once it was opened, he was not going anywhere.
yeah,
Um, that's how I saw it.
yeah.
Especially because, like, it wasn't just anything with the screen, because he was going through the lights as well.
Yeah.
And so which was a weird thing too, because for a creature that needed the lights to like jump around through and everything like that, he would always
Hmm.
be turning them off. So I was just like, what? So there were some parts of this movie that were little like confusing.
Hmm.
um and so I was just like, and I think that it's once he jumped out of the lights that they turned off, now that I'm thinking about it. um
He burns
yes.
through them because he takes the energy. Yeah.
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 And so that was interesting. I did think that was interesting. And there was this, whereas the first one was this, in Z, the creature was like an imaginary friend. They never really explain it, which was fine.
Hmm.
That what this creature was, but just that it it didn't really hop to the child. It was using the child to get back to the mom, because the
Yeah.
mom had abandoned it. Um,
Yep.
and so it really wanted the mom.
Yeah.
And I found that interesting. And in this one, he the creature invades the devices to tell
Mhm.
this storybook
Yeah.
story about himself and about
Hmm.
how he wants to be friends and he needs
Right.
somebody who doesn't have friends. And
Yep.
um it and it spoke to a larger aspect of being like autistic and stuff like that, where you are kind of isolated and you are
Yeah.
kind of alone in that way, because it's hard to make friends because you're different. um
Yeah.
and I liked that when um the midpoint where the one kid who used to be his friend, who was his now
Hmm.
his bully and everything like that, ended up seeing Larry and getting traumatized by him,
Yep.
um then came back around and was
Yeah.
just like, you know hey, why weren't you friend my friend, like you said, and they resolved that and they became friends again.
Yeah.
And they were just like, and then they brought in the other two friends and stuff like that. It was
Yeah.
finding that common ground and finding that, you know
Hmm.
you know sometimes your parents mess you up. um
Yeah.
they're trying to do good things, but parents mess
Hmm.
us up. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
sure I
They
messed
do.
up my own kids in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah. Nobody's
um
perfect. Yeah.
yeah. And
Yeah.
so I do I there's a lot of interesting stuff going through both of these movies, and that's why, again, this is why I like talking about these, is because, like, sometimes I'll watch movies that people bring to me and I'm just like, okay, they're fine. But once we get to talking about them, it starts to reveal
Sure.
those other layers that
Yeah.
I hadn't thought of while I was watching it. So that's
Yeah.
that's fun.
What did you think of like the creature designs overall for these? Because I mean, they're similar enough. I mean, it's always the same, like tall, lanky, weird looking,
Yeah,
but they're still also like very different.
I thought, yeah, because Larry, because we don't see too much of Z.
Mm-mm. We
Um,
only see them
well,
twice.
yeah. Larry, you see a few times more. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, it's it's honestly, no, I think that both of them, they're the problem with both of them, and even stuff with, like, the boogeyman and stuff like that, it becomes this generic shorthand. For
Yeah.
me, is that you just get the tall, lanky, weird, creepy, dude type creature,
Yep.
and it's almost like, everybody's taking the Slender Man
Hmm.
thing and just extrapolating it out, making it a little different here or there, changing a few
Sure.
things. But overall, um, I
Yeah.
think that it's just kind of, I mean, they're fine. They're nothing blowing me out of the water. I'd like to see more original stuff, or at least
Yeah.
trying to do something a little bit different.
Mm.
Especially, honestly, I'd like to see more practical stuff. Because
Hmm.
both of these were pretty digital.
Yes.
And they weren't bad in any way by being
Yeah.
digital. Because it's kind of hard to make a creature like that and not be digital. But I think that's kind of the problem too. Like I said, you get this generic looking creature. I'd rather something happen that was more
Hmm.
um, you know, um creepy and weird. That maybe it's a small little homunculus kind of guy or something like that,
Right.
and so that
Yeah.
that might be more interesting in a way too, especially if you can get something that just skitters around rather than
Yeah.
having to be so huge in the space as well. So
Yeah. I I thought, when we get the shot that got me, I think the most in Z specifically is when he's crawling through the tunnel. He's like the little kid. So the little kid goes to the
yeah,
tunnel and then you see Z after him. And
yeah,
it
yeah,
happens like so fast. I was not expecting that was like the best. But then we get the shot of him in the tub with the mom. I was fine with it from, a very it looked very humanoid in nature, which I think if you're going to make up an imaginary friend as a kid, that makes sense. Like I can get on board with the way that he looked, but yeah, he was pretty generic. And then the creature that they used for that played Larry, that they used for Larry in Come Play was very I don't know if you've ever seen the Don't Be Afraid of the Dark about the tooth fairies. Have you ever seen that? It's got Katie
Maybe.
Holmes. She's
Mm,
this
I
couple's
may
like
have, but it's been a
renovation.
long time.
Oh God, it's so good. It's one of my. But so the creatures that are the tooth fairies. Spoiler, they're not good.
Yeah.
They literally like Larry is like a blown up version of them, almost identical.
Oh,
So and
okay.
then I feel like when I saw the creature design for the newer Boogeyman, they were also really similar. Like and so it's I think Larry was creepy at some of the shots we see where he's like walking around and he's got these crazy looking arms. I thought his hands looked really creepy with the long nails when he's like telling the little boy to come closer or whatever he's doing beside the bed. Like some of those shots were really good, and his feet, I thought that all looked good. But overall,
Yeah.
yeah, I agree with you. I think they're very generic monsters. It's like when you play an indie horror game and you know that you're like, oh, I see this monster in every indie horror game because it's like
Yeah.
part of it's like they just reuse the asset because it's there and it's either free or it's cheap or whatever. And so yeah, I'm with you. I think the monsters were fine, but they weren't really the strengths of either film.
Yeah. No, I felt the concept was more interesting than the actual
Yes.
creatures.
Yeah.
Um,
I agree.
it's yeah, it's just I don't know. Like I saw some people on Letterboxd um like compare at least one of these to the Babadook. Um
Oh,
and I get that. It comes down in that same kind of um arena. But I felt like at least the Babadook was an interesting creature design. So at least if you're going to do something like that, make it interesting and weird. Like stop going with
yeah.
the skinny, like long, like tall dudes.
All things.
you know,
Yeah. I mean, and I,
it's
I
just
love Smile, but they did the same thing in Smile. It's like it's a tall, lanky thing with
yeah.
long, stringy hair, and it's like, yeah, seen it.
But
Same
see
thing
what I
with
liked about
Barbarian. It's the same thing, like over and over again.
eh, kind of. I mean, Barbarian. I like Barbarian a lot. Um, at Barbarian, there's a lot going on with that one. But it's and I think that at least with Smile, I would say um that for the most part you only see it the one time. And most of the time it's just more kind of a nebulous being. And so I thought that was more interesting than anything else is,
Hmm.
you know, but no,
Yeah.
I get what you're saying though. Like, yeah, no, I really want people to, and that's the thing though. If you're going to, at least with Smile and even with Barbarian, that they fit within that similar theme, but both of them were just different enough that
Hmm. Yep.
I couldn't compare them to these two, whereas these just felt so generic. Um, and it felt more, it felt better if they would have done it, kept them in the shadow. At least that's what Z did well about, was keeping them more in the shadows and not
Yeah.
on screen a lot. Keeping
Yeah.
it
I think
more.
it's way more unsettling when you don't know where something is
Yeah.
and you don't see it. It's like sometimes less is more.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Especially when it's something like that, because you're dealing with the kid's imagination or a kid's fears or whatever like that. And it's always going to be. It was the same thing with Boogeyman,
Yep.
where they kind of dealt with it kind of in the same way, where it was a similar design, but they hit it for the most part.
Yeah.
And I like that a lot more too.
Yeah.
Um, that it's just kept more in that realm. Just
Yeah.
keep it off screen as much as possible.
I
So
agree. Yeah. No, I'm with you. I agree.
yeah. But yeah, I like both of these movies. I don't think either one of these is bad.
Yeah.
I think that and talking about the relationship between the couple in this, the relationship between the dad and the kid and everything like that. I think that ultimately both of the parents are trying to do what's right for the kid.
Oh yeah.
The dad in Come Play isn't necessarily a bad dad or even a bad husband, um because there's nothing, it doesn't seem like there's anything. And maybe I missed it. Maybe I'm not remembering something, but they didn't seem to have any real issue in their
No,
marriage
I
other
think she's
than,
yeah, I think she's just pushing buttons and seeing what works because
yeah,
she's unhappy. She's unhappy
yeah,
and she's unfulfilled and she doesn't know how to fix it, so she's grasping at straws.
yeah. And she's just
Yeah.
pushing at everything. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Um, and and I liked Jillian Jacobs being in this one too from Community. It was a we didn't specify her, but she's really good in this. It was nice
That's
to
who
see
plays the
her in,
mom or
yeah,
okay.
yeah. Um,
Yeah. Yeah,
she
she's a good.
yeah, she played Britta on Community. So it was definitely a different role for her.
Right.
So, um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, I think she did real good. You could tell she was just like she felt like every moment you saw her, it looked like
Mhm.
she was gonna unravel
Yeah,
at
she
any
was super
moment. Like she looked
convincing.
like she was on the verge of
Mhm.
a massive meltdown. Um,
Mhm.
and because I mean, you're dealing with the kid, you're dealing with the marriage and whatever issues you're having with it and whatnot. But it's, I I liked that in the end, that they came together to help their son and everything. I like
Yeah.
that again, this is a movie where the mom sacrifices herself.
Yep.
In both of these, they both sacrifice themselves for their children.
Yep.
One a little bit more successful than the other.
Yep.
Um, Z
Yeah.
ends up on a very a creepy note. Um,
Yeah.
and
The other mom in Come Play, like that moment, and I'm like, I wasn't like this until I had my own child, but the
yeah,
stuff like this, I'm like such a sap for because like that moment, right before she like turns into the weird like dried out version of herself, and Larry takes her away.
yeah,
She looks down at her kid, and they like have this moment. He like makes eye contact with her, and it was just this like that makes me tear up. Like I was so invested in him and their relationship and all the things she was trying to do that she just kept messing up and kept messing up, and I was so invested in it. And it was like she finally did the right thing. And then before she fades away, she gets that like one moment of validation from her
yeah,
son, which is all she had wanted.
yeah,
And I think in an unhealthy way, you could argue for a majority of the film. But
yeah,
but she finally realizes that it's not about all the things he's doing. It's about the things that she's doing. And so she finally makes the right decision. And I just love that moment. Yeah, like you said, Z ends on a very different, slightly more ambiguous note with the mom
yeah,
surviving the suicide attempt and then like the kid saying goodnight to Z, even though he's like not supposed to be there anymore.
yeah.
Um, yeah, and like come play is just better as far as like the wrap up because you get this like kid who gets to go back and be with his friends and his dad's there and they're doing
His
better and
dad's yeah, his dad is like
yeah,
his dad is being the more attentive,
yep,
more present dad.
yes,
um and like you were saying with her, like her getting that kind of validation moment of that.
yeah,
I wanted to you know talk about that because we talked about how she, through the whole movie, it's always about it wasn't always about her, but there was a lot of it that was how it was affecting her and not about
yes,
how it was affecting
yep,
him.
yep,
And so in that moment when she sacrifices herself and grabs Larry's hand, and gets that kind of validation moment, I think
yeah,
she realizes that, and when she does the sacrifice, that's when she realizes I've got to save my son, like because
yeah,
it's the not because of me, but because of him. And
yeah,
um and then you get that moment later, after,
Oh my
you
God,
see
I
the
know.
dad more attentive and everything, and then
Yeah.
you've got the kid going down the steps, and he's like, he hears a noise, and then you're like, oh shit, Larry's back.
I
um but
know.
but then but then he's downstairs, and the dad comes down, and he's just giggling, and he's being flung around the room. He's being spun around, and the dad brings his phone up to look, because you can only see them through the phone, apparently. And then he sees the mom spinning the kid around and having this moment together, this happy moment. And it's
Hmm.
like the family, she's gone from the real world and everything like that, but they're finally like fully a family in a way.
Right. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's this
Yeah.
weird end, but it's a happy but kind of sad end too.
Yeah.
um but it's definitely more of a positive ending in a way, because it's more about, the kid
Hmm.
is happy himself, so
Yeah. It's a lot more straightforward, I think, than Z.
yeah.
I think you can argue a couple of different ways with Z is like what it means, what is this the case? Is this the case? But I think with Come Play, it's just a lot more black and white.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's I think I land more on Come Play being the better movie for me, in a lot of
Yeah.
ways, because of that. It's just a more
Yeah.
fulfilling movie. And I think it's interesting too, because we mentioned how Z, both of these kind of they're kind of longish and everything, and it's so funny too, because we talked about what they could have shortened in Z, but Z is only
Mhm.
83 minutes as it is.
Oh
So
dang.
and so it's funny that even at 83 minutes there's these long minutes. If you shorten it anymore, it would not be a feature
It's a
film,
short.
so yeah.
Yeah.
But that's where I think that they, and I forgot about this, I was going to mention that, was because they could have taken out some of that wasted time, where she's just kind of like, the mom's just kind of puttering around, and maybe fleshed out the Z story a little bit more, like fleshed out the lore
Yeah.
a bit, towards the end, gave us a little bit more exposition around why and how long
Yeah.
he'd been, like, maybe it was attached to her mom or something, like that.
Yeah.
Make
Because
it,
it kind of comes out of nowhere. Yeah.
yeah. And it would make
Yeah.
sense in a way too, because, like, here I am rewriting a movie. It would have been interesting to, have it been, it was attached to her, but it was attached to her mom before. And now that her mom's dead, that's what, or her mom was dying now, and had lost a lot of her mental faculties, that now that's why it was attaching to her son. So it
Yeah.
was just kind of passing along. So I think there's definitely some room there that you could have made the story even more interesting, and kind of not cut down on the runtime, but make that runtime more worth it. um
Yeah.
so, because there's nothing saying that a horror movie has to be short, or just
No.
pack it with good stuff. I mean, some of my favorite horror movies are like 2.5 hours long, um
Yeah. You just have to
because
use
they're
the
good.
time that you have the viewer's attention. You just have to use it wisely.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. No,
Um,
I
and
totally
I think,
agree.
overall, I don't think either one of these does anything like, that's always what I say is the greatest sin of a movie, is that, um, if it's boring, if it's uninteresting, if I was like looking at my phone more than I was looking at the movie,
Oh God, I hate
and
that.
so,
Yeah.
um, and I do that anyway, because while I'm watching movies at home, I'm constantly looking up all the trivia and all the other stuff about the movie. So
Yeah.
I'm really bad about doing that. Like, if I'm in the movie theater, my phone's put away, but for some reason I can't do
Sure.
that when I'm at home.
No, I
Um
get it. I'm guilty of that too.
but it's hard to do when you run a podcast. You got to know all the little stuff. Um
Hmm.
but it's I think that it's both of these were interesting, and that they did okay. Little things aside, I think both of these movies are really good. If you like that kind of whole vibe, little kids in peril, moms trying to do what they can, or parent trying to do what they can to um
Yeah.
do it. I mean, it fits in that, like you said, the most recent kind of version of this is the Boogeyman. Um and so if that's your vibe, these movies are good.
Yeah.
definitely go check them out. Um, Come Play is on Prime for free with ads,
Hmm.
and Z was on Shutter.
Shutter.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
definitely go check those out. Do you have anything else you want to talk about either one of these movies that we haven't mentioned?
No, I think we covered it all.
All right. Well, why don't you let people know where they can find you online?
Yeah, so primarily we're on YouTube, just Voices from the Mausoleum. If you put it in any social media thing, you're probably going to find it. But I have a Twitter and an Instagram as well. Twitter, I think, is From Mausoleum, and then Instagram is just Voices from the Mausoleum, the whole thing. But yeah, that's primarily where you can find me.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, no, definitely go check out her YouTube channel. It's got lots of fun stuff. I've been on there a couple of times. We were just talking about getting me on again.
Yeah,
So we will you might see me on there again soon.
yeah, be fun.
But yeah, definitely go check out her stuff. She talks about lots of stuff. She's got so many episodes. It's crazy. Found footage, video games, all kinds of stuff.
Crazy
Yeah.
is a very great word. Chaotic, I would say, is
Yeah.
also another really good one. Yeah.
Yeah. There's always like, and that's the funny thing too, is like, with even my own show, it's like, when we talked about this kind of off air and everything, is that there's
Yeah.
always so much we want to do.
Oh my
And
God, I
it's like,
know.
it's kind of like, it's hard not to try to just do it. We might as well try, and do what we can. If
Sure.
it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's what I try. That's how I try to do it. So.
Yeah.
But thank you again for coming on. It's always a lot of fun having you here.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. I was
Yeah.
excited to finally get to talk about these. Nobody else likes them, so it was
There you
fun.
go.
Thanks for
Well,
inviting
hopefully,
me back.
yeah. Well, hopefully some people will come check these out, and they can let us know, and you know tell you if they liked it or not. So
Yeah.
they can go and either be give you praise for suggesting it, or hate for
Be
suggesting it.
mad.
Either way works.
I can handle it.
Right. All right. Well, thanks again, and I appreciate you coming on.
Yeah. Thanks again for having me.
Thanks again to Angel for joining me. On Friday, we begin the journey into the MCU's multiverse saga with WandaVision, with returning guest Violet Hammond. And on Monday, Onika returns to talk about Slumber Party Massacre 2 and Hello Mary Lou Prom Night 2. Thanks for listening. Creepy and Geeky is a part of the Morbidly Beautiful Podcast Network. Please check out morbidlybeautiful.com/podcasts for more great shows. If you like what you've heard, please consider giving the show 5 stars and a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Also, please share the podcast on social media to help spread the word. Make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast app or at creepyandgeeky.com. Music for the podcast is Gratitude, composed by Jerry Smith. You can follow the podcast on social media at Creepy and Geeky on both Twitter and Instagram. If you'd like to follow me, I'm Geek Thulu on Twitter and Blue Sky, and geek.thulu on Instagram. You can support the podcast by ordering teas and more on TeePublic or by donating to the coffee page. All of the links are in the show notes. Finally, don't forget, stay creepy.